already in studio. That is Certified Public Accounts Gerard Githuku. Thank you so much for making time. But before that, I want us to first of all look at the controversial finance bill, the proposal in it. What are some of the gains, and of course what are some of the losses? And one of the things that we'll be discussing about, let's first of all take a look at the additional tax that has been proposed. Now, there is additional tax of introduction of the export and investment promotion that is on levy that has been proposed to be included in the tax. Then we have 35% income tax above 500,000 for those who are earning above 500,000. Then there is an increase in turnover tax from 1% to 3%. Then another interesting one is 15% withholding tax on content creators. Then we have 16 value tax that is on fuel from 8 to 16. That is almost double. Then we have another one on insurance claim, the 20% deposit tax on dispute. Now this one, if you have any dispute with the Kenya Revenue Authorities, then you have to deposit at least 20,000. 20% of the tax before any dispute can be resolved. And that is another very key interesting that is in that finance, the proposed 2023 finance bill. Then another one that is very key of interest to look, it is let's now take a look at the exemption tax, some of the things that have been exempted on. And one thing that it's very much of interesting to watch is the exemption on sugar, that is sugarcane and flour. From, of course, this is an area that has been proposed, like there will be no tax on that. Then we have LPG exemption tax from 8%, the previous 8% to 0%. Then we have raw materials on fertilizer and manufacturing from 0 rating. So that is another area that has been, exempted. Then we have aircraft spare parts. Then another area that will be of keen interest to look at, that remember I mentioned earlier on, it's the VAT exemption of flour and sugarcane. I guess this is just to lower the cost of living. Well, now I want to dive, to beam my guest into the heart of this discussion. Well, thank you so much once again for making time to speak to KUTV. When you look at this proposed finance bill, there is some gains and of course some loss, so to speak. Do you think Kenyans can actually look at this proposed finance bill and have something to smile about the future, or rather be optimistic that in the end, in as much as there is some, take and give, at the end of the day, the good will outweigh the bad?
Thank you, Evans, for the invitation.
All right.
And good evening to all the viewers of KUTV. My name is Gerard Githuku. I represent ISPAC.
Okay.
I'm a member of Public Finance and Tax Committee. I also work for GMK Accountant LLP, is a consulting firm.
All right.
Maybe to come to your question about the gain or the favorable and unfavorable of the proposed finance bill. When you look at the budget for 2023-2024, the budget is a 3.6 trillion budget. And look at the projected revenue is 2.5 trillion. So we are left with a deficit of around 700 billion. So any government of any country has to strike the balance on how to close the deficit. And of course, there will be some areas where the government will be able to levy tax. Of course, other areas will be where the government will be able to extend the savings to the taxpayer. So I can say it's a balanced, it's a double-edged budget, where it is going to have some favorable provisions, and of course, unfavorable provisions to ensure that they're able to correct and meet their expenditure.
All right. Well, when you look, for example, one that is very interesting to take a look at is the VAT, the value added tax on the, let's say, fuel from 8 to 16%. Well, when you increase, the tax on fuel, it's like basically you're increasing the price of almost everything, because it will affect, the manufacturing, the transportation, everything, even the production, because some of the industries depend on this fuel for production. Well, that basically means that you'll be increasing the cost of living, and the burden will trickle down to common mwananchi. Do you think this is maybe a wise idea?
If you look at VAT on petroleum product, it's 2 years ago, in 2021, the VAT had been proposed at 16%. But due to the public outcry, then the rate was brought to 8%.
All right.
So in this year financial budget, the VAT is being proposed to be increased from 8% to 16%.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the implication of that increment by 16% is that when you increase the fuel prices, of course, it's going to have an adverse effect to the economy. Take for instance in Kenya, 65% of the tax that is 65% of fuel per liter is taxes. So there's a lot of levies. And then, so we are saying, out of 100 shillings, 65 goes to tax. So it's only a small margin that is going now to earn the fuel. So the impact is that it's going to cause inflation of the country. And once this inflation is caused, it's going to hit the common mwananchi. Because you're going to look at the price is going to increase, the cost of transport is going to increase.
Right.
And even the manufacturing. Remember, there is fossil fuel. The manufacturers use fossil fuels for manufacturing and transport. So it's going to increase the cost of production. And of course, they're going to have an increase in the cost of production and high price in the market.
All right. Well, because when basically the cost of living and the cost of production, the cost of living, everything literally shoots up, then that means a country is in crisis. But I want to get your thought on this. Do you think overtaxing Kenyans is the solution, of course, to the burden that actually the crisis that Kenya finds itself in? Do you think that will solve the debt burden that Kenya is facing currently?
Overtaxing Kenyan is not the solution, because the debate also with the economic prevailing in the country.
All right.
So is the country able to produce? Is the economy stable? If it's not stable, even if you try to tax Kenyans, of course, there's not going to be much levy that is going to correct. So I think the government should be able to balance whatever they are able to impose as taxes, and also look at the capability of the taxpayers.
All right.
And the taxpayer is able to raise this money to look at the economic environment in the country. At the moment, it's very low.
Mm-hmm. So
the government should look at other ways. They need to harmonize the taxes. They need to look at how to administer the taxes. They see the tax loopholes, maybe where where there are some tax leakages in the country, so that they're able to save on taxes.
All right, and we will come to the loopholes that need to be sealed in order for Kenyans to get the value for their money, because when you're taxed, at the end of the day, you expect that the money will be used to the maximum ability of what it's supposed to do. But there is a point that you mentioned about like how to deal with this. If you are to recommend, or rather to give your input to the already, the finance debate that is very controversial, and to some it has, sparked some sort of mixed reaction from a section of Kenyans, political leaders. But from the observer's point of view and an expert in this area, what sort of advice will you have, given into this debate of finance bill?
As I said, the finance bill, the 2023-2024 finance bill is one of the most contagious finance bills.
Right.
It's in the public domain. The issue that we have mentioned about the issue of the Housing Development Fund. So we need to look at it critically. We need to look at the positive impact and the negative impact. And we see, is there a balance? Because we don't only look at the negative part of it. We also need to look at the tax incentive that the taxpayers are being granted in this finance bill. So I will look, my advice is let's look at let's critique the finance bill, let's look at the content, and of course we need to now to evaluate. Is it favorable or unfavorable to the common or to the taxpayer?
All right.
Yeah.
Well, you talk about the content. Let me give you an insight of what is in this particular context. Now, the government proposed, this is the production, of course, the introduction of export on investment promotion levy on specified import. That is an area that will be increased. And then there is 35% income tax for those who are earning above 500,000. That is another area. I think it's from 30 to 35. That has slight increment of 5%. Then there is the housing levy, of course, that 3% housing levy. Then we have increased turnover from 1 to 3%. Then we have another one, the fuel VAT from 8 to 16. Well, then on the flip side, we have the likes of export services exemption. That is at least a positive side on it. Then we have the LPG exemption from 8%, current 8% to 0. Then we have raw material on fertilizer and manufacturing from 0 rating. Then another area is aircraft spare parts. Then we have exemption on flour and sugarcane transportation. Well, when you look at the striking balance between the proposed increase and of course the reduction, do you think there is a balance in this?
Let me not say there's a balance. I think we need to cut a specific item. If I may touch on the few items that we have talked about, the increase. Let's start with the employment income. The expansion of the base from the bar from 30 to 35%.
All right.
So you're saying anyone who is earning over 6 million per year should now be at that 5%. So we are looking at what would be the tax impact on that. We are looking at is the government able to collect sizable income from that? I don't know what you're saying, that you look at the statistics, most employees' salaries from maximum of 100,000 shillings. So even if the government is able to increase that rate, they might not be able to collect significant tax because there are only very few taxpayers who earn above that income. At the same time, these are the same people that are also maybe servicing mortgages. So we are minimizing the disposable income of that person. So you look at the you have mentioned about the turnover tax. It's still unfavorable to SMEs because what happened under this finance bill is proposing now to decrease the turnover because currently or initially the turnover was covering anyone who is 1 million to 50 million. Then you pay tax at 1%. But at the moment now is decreasing the threshold. That means it's now from 500,000 to 15 million, and the rate has also been increased to 3%. 3%, yeah. So the impact is to the SMEs because the people who are in that range are the SMEs. So once now you expand that tax band, then you are now transiting this SME to a normal tax regime. So of course it's going to affect the SMEs. So if we have mentioned about LPG on VAT, liquefied petroleum gas. So currently it's 8%, but the bill is proposing to exempt. So of course that is going to encourage. It's going to reduce the cost of power. Remember, we are now going toward the green energy environment. So we are going to have reduced price of the commodity. But we need to ask our question that when the government reduce a rate and put it at the exempt, are we be able to maximize that reduction in price? Because once an item has been exempt, that the taxpayers might not be able to reap that benefit. Because when a particular item is exempt, then the producer or the manufacturer of that product, he cannot be able to claim input VAT. And therefore the cost might not necessarily drop as expected.
So you mean even exempting, some sort of commodities will not help in the long run?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what is the solution?
The solution is to say specific for the basic commodities. The government should retain them as zero rated.
All right.
Because zero rated means that there's no VAT. And in case the producer incurred VAT, he can be able to claim as a refund. So that one, it's more cost reduction as opposed to exempt. Because exempt, the producer will still be able, when you purchase the raw materials, you still be able to pay VAT. For instance, if I'm producing gas, I still have to pay go down, and I will still have to pay VAT on go down, including transport. So you find that the cost might not necessarily minimize as compared to zero rated.
Right.
So when the product are zero rated, then they are more beneficial than when they're exempted.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, you talk about the LPG gas, of course. And then we have the likes of, when you reduce the cost of, or rather when you exempt the LPG gas and you increase, the cost of, let's say you increase taxes on fuel. What are you trying to do? Because, at the end of the day, the ripple effect will still be felt because everything, just like I said, depend on the production, and fuel is a very key component as far as this, the way the economy runs, and even the inflow, production, and everything depends on fuel. Does it help?
Oh, I get your concern because it's give and take. You increase petroleum product prices and you lower the LPG. Let me say it's depending on the particular, because fuel is when talk of VAT on fuel is petroleum product. But I remember sometimes there was the government is also facing pressure from other international bodies that why do you go for public debts when you can be able to collect VAT? So the government has also to listen to other bodies like MIF or World Bank that some of these you need to impose taxes so that the same taxes you use now to provide services to the citizen or to the Kenyan. So it's I say it's give and take, but of course we are looking at LPG is more to Wajiko because we are talking of green energy. Everyone now going to green energy, the clean environment. So LPG might have a more benefit, if I may say, and then of course now the petroleum product also it has still the same effect, but we are looking at the balancing effect of the two. Yeah.
But what is the point of having exemption, tax exemption on LPG gas, and of course you increase the fuel, of course the VAT on fuel to 16%, then this means even the ordinary mwananchi sometimes will be the burden will be too much, even to afford the basics, even the few coins to actually even fill that particular gas will be very expensive for him. Then don't you think this is, at the same time trying to, burn at the same time, trying to give it some sort of injection?
If I may say, the government has to collect revenue. End of the day, the government is looking at the revenue. And they have to look at which one do we collect more. So remember, there is also pressure to collect and to finance the expenditure. So probably they have to balance, the government has to balance which one, if we drop, we are going to collect less, and which one to go to collect. Of course, look at the petroleum product. All the factories in this country consume fuel, or transport, and all that. So the government, of course, has that in mind, that, of course, 16% VAT, of course, is going to bridge the gap of the deficit.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, now let's switch gears to the estimated finance budget. That is 3.6 trillion, and I want to give you a few statistics that I'm sure you're aware of. Government had targeted at least 2.5 trillion. That is the in-source revenue, but so far, the last time I checked, it was 1.5. Very far. Now the deficit is 1 trillion. And now the big question that many are asking right now, where, of course, how will you come up with the remaining, fund in just a couple of days, and how will it work? Of course, the government had proposed, now this is where the finance bill comes, to actually increase tax so that they can at least source for additional 600 billion. But do you think this is now, another hole that actually we have dig for ourselves?
Okay. So you look at the deficit at the moment. If we check the Kenya Bureau of Statistics, as at March this year, the 9-month budget, the 9-month period, the government has managed to collect 1.3 trillion. And here they are saying we be able to collect 2.5 trillion in 2024. So the government has still to borrow, and some of these measures are try to fill in the gap. Over the years, the government has always borrowed money internationally and also locally. I think at the moment it's over around 8 billion, the public debts, if I'm not wrong. And remember, there is also the public debt.
The one that government needs to pay.
The one the government needs to, the money that has been borrowed.
Yeah, it was 8 point something roughly.
Yeah.
I think the president say if you round off, it's around 9 trillion.
Yeah, 9 trillion. Yeah. And remember, of course, now there is the pressure because I think the ceiling at the moment is 10 billion.
Yeah.
And there is this debate that is in the parliament that they want to put a law that the public debt should not exceed, should be based on the GDP.
All right.
55% of the GDP should be how much we be able to borrow. So we'll see the government will be able to borrow, of course, with interest rate.
Okay.
And of course, now they have to bridge with these tax proposals,
okay,
which are being proposed.
Well, another thing that was of key interest, government spent 1.7 trillion to service our debt, and actually that is almost half of our budget. Then the big question, like, how will we survive? Because this, this comes at a time when many public institutions are struggling. You know the story about the county government, and one may just wonder where we're heading. Of course, Kenyans, obviously, they're being, overtaxed. And at the same time, we have to service our debt. Then we have to still run our economy. And yet, problems are still crippling in. Do you think there is a way out? Even as we wind this particular conversation.
Yeah, there's a way out. The government is keen. At the moment they are keen, they have to balance. Of course, you need to renegotiate your debts with the external lenders. The government has done that. We have seen also the government is trying to encourage more investments by attracting foreign direct investments in the country.
All right.
We have seen the government is also trying to control the expenditure, because one thing that the government need to do is just to spend whatever they have collected. So if they're able to try to save money, to save the tax loopholes, they try to work on the wage bills, they try to encourage local investments. Of course, they're going to, I know it's a long process, but of course, if they manage it well, they'll be able to reservice the public debt as well as continue with the normal day-to-day running expenditure of the government.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, the option of renegotiating, of course, of debts, this to some might sound like a bad idea, because when you go there, then there will be issues like, oh, now we want accountability, and sometimes you might be forced to pay by the donors. Do you think this could be a dangerous move, of course, for the country? Even I know there is some other means of tackling this. We have like austerity measures where the government can decide now to cut the expend. This could still be one of the reasons, or rather one of the measures to help at least ease the burden of common mwananchi.
Yes. What happened is, when you're pressed, you have to see how to survive.
All right.
And I may say that some of this public debt, they come with preconditions.
Mm-hmm.
I think the World Bank is, I read, the World Bank is intending to disburse around 128 billion to the country, but they have some preconditions.
Mm-hmm.
That we want you to accountability, there are issues of public policy, the use of green energy. So of course that has to be in. And because of course you are the one who needs the funds, you have to ensure that you fulfill most of those conditions,
mm-hmm.
if possible.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I want you to take this as your parting shot, and still on these measures in case if we hit at crisis level. And there is another alternative that someone had suggested, the defaulting. How about that?
Even okay, let me see. If you look at the finance bill, the proposed bills, so we see it as a balanced bill,
mm-hmm.
because much has been published. The public domain, sometimes of the advanced provisions, but you cannot forget that we still have other positive proposals.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the issue of income tax, there is issue of the mileage claims,
mm-hmm.
where now the employee can claim mileage claims if they are on public official duties.
Mm-hmm.
There is issue of industrial building allowance on industrial building and docks, where now the investors or the taxpayer can claim industrial building at 10%, including the dock.
Mm-hmm. So
this is going to encourage shipping business and the blue economy.
Mm-hmm.
We have got all positive things like we are talking about the LPG, including exportation of services.
Mm-hmm.
Because initially, remember, exportation of services was VAT 16%, but now it's being exempt. So we have positive, including the refund. Previously, for you to get a VAT refund, it was capped to 2 years, but now has been reduced to 6 months. So we have got positive provisions in this finance bill, and of course we have got some very advanced provisions in the bill.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to look at it critically. The members of parliament we pray that they be sober when they're voting for this bill, so that the common mwananchi will going to benefit from this bill.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Gerald Githuku, of course, thank you so much for making time to speak to KUTV, and it's always a pleasure, of course, to having this discussion on the importance of this finance bill that actually touch the running of affairs, and of course it touches the economy and the common mwananchi and how the affairs of countries should be run, and actually they do have a say, and that's why every day we endeavor to, of course, bring the discussion closer to you so that you can understand what is happening and what is going on pertaining to decisions and matters that are of great concern to you.